This is the Feiyutech Scorp Mini 2, Feiyutech's current top-of-the-line tiny gimbal for mirrorless cameras. This is the smaller of their Scorp 2 lineup. Featuring a metal and plastic build, OLED touchscreen, various buttons for control, and a multifunction knob, plus some other fun tools, this gimbal definitely isn't short on features. First, let's run through the specs before putting this thing to the test to see if it's the right gimbal for you. This gimbal will only cost you $270, and for that you get a gimbal that weighs 852 grams, nice and light. Its payload capacity is 1.2 kilos with Bluetooth and cable control, and it has a really cool AI unit built into the gimbal, so you don't need any extra module or anything, it's built in. In regards to gimbal features, there are loads. We have the typical pan follow, pan tilt follow, and FPV mode. We then have the vortex mode that all gimbals can now do, but then there's even more, like a lot more. There's a time-lapse mode, hyperlapse mode, panorama mode, vertical shooting mode, where you don't have to take the gimbal off. It's basically like, it just points it straight up and then you use it like this, but hey, it technically is a portrait shooting mode. And a tracking mode that really, it should be called waypoint mode. It's really cool though. Essentially, you set your waypoints and you tell the gimbal how long you want it to stay there, and then you set the next waypoint and like use the joystick to move the camera's position, and then you set multiple waypoints, and depending on how long it stays there, it will then have all these points set up, and then once you hit start, it will start recording and go from the first waypoint to the second to the third, all the way to the last, and then it will end the recording for you. That's really handy. You can also, of course, switch out the camera from horizontal to portrait with the L bracket system that the gimbal has. It's fairly quick to do, and I'd say it's on par with most other gimbals. The Scorp Mini 2 has Bluetooth and cable control, but being a Lumix user, I didn't really have high hopes for the Bluetooth because it seems like none of the gimbals I own let me control my camera using Bluetooth. So I tried it out with the Scorp and yeah, no luck, it's no different. But rather than just accepting it and being frustrated and, well, using the camera cable, which by the way, it's not a huge deal, the cable makes it work perfect, so anyway, but I decided to find out why this is, and it turns out this is down to Lumix. To control the camera via Bluetooth, it has to be using the Bluetooth control protocol. Lumix, however, uses the Wi-Fi control protocol. Now, these two protocols can't talk to each other, so essentially you're stuck with using the cable. But at least you can use the cable to control the camera, so at least you're not missing out on any functionality from the gimbal. There is also a compatibility list built into the app, so you can check if your camera works with this system. And the next thing to take into consideration is the good old does my camera fit test. And let's have a look at the Lumix S9, my new camera that I will be making a video about soon. Does it fit? Yes. Congratulations. The Lumix S5 Mark II. Does it fit? Kinda. It kinda fits. With smaller gimbals, there's the obvious drawback of reduced payload capacity as well as a smaller clearance capacity. There is a way to get around this though by using counterbalance weights, but then you have to balance that with the total payload capacity that the gimbal can handle, so it's a little bit of like give and take, and you can see here I couldn't really figure out how to do it. I don't have a cage for my camera, so I just, you know. Okay, the moment you guys have been the most curious about, the AI features, this AI module that's built into the gimbal. I would say out of all gimbals that we see on YouTube nowadays, a lot of them have like little things that make them cool, but a majority of their features are pretty much the same. It can lift this much, it looks like this, it only weighs this amount, blah, blah, blah. But this AI tracking thing is actually pretty cool, especially in a gimbal this small and this cheap. It is unfortunately not at the ChatGPT level where I can have it do all the filmmaking for me, kind of, but well, yeah, kind of. It kind of can. Right now we're running up these stairs and Gustavo doesn't have to worry about where the camera's pointing because this amazing AI gimbal is taking care of that for him. And we're at the top. How easy was that, Gustavo?
That was very easy, I didn't die, bro.
There we go. Basically what this module does is it tracks your subject. What you'll have to do is have your subject do an OK sign, and then the gimbal snaps onto them and it sticks with them. And as you can see here, I'm running around, like running in a circle anyway. Like this isn't the fastest. I do get a little faster and then eventually I'm like, I'm gonna fall or like sprain my ankle again. So I'm not gonna keep like bolting it, but it kept up, and I was genuinely like, I thought I'd lose it. I was actually taking it easy at first. I'm like, oh, there's no way. And then I was like, okay, it's keeping up. Let's just try it. Why not? There's no harm if it doesn't keep up. Then I say that in the video. It kept up. And even my friends George and Gustavo, who helped me film here, they were both really impressed, like, wow, it's keeping up. Now, yes, there are ways you can lose it. Of course, it's not perfect, but I was very impressed, genuinely. Here you can see George going behind a tree, and then the gimbal stops, and it just stays where it last saw him until it sees him again, and then it snaps back onto him and continues to follow him. Genuinely, again, impressive. Next, of course, if you run up to the camera really fast and then you dip out of frame, yeah, it loses you. But then once you come back into frame, it snaps back onto you. Again, very impressive. Now, one thing I was really hoping for with the AI tracking was to be able to track a subject that wasn't able to do the okay sign. Because for example, if I want to track my dog Arlo, then, well, I can't really ask him to do that. And so even though it's really cool that my gimbal can follow me around, it is a little bit limited. And I suppose it's not the biggest deal, because if I'm going to be using this for a commercial setting, for example, or I'm filming a friend, filming a model, making some sort of video which is scripted and structured, then I can always ask them to do an okay sign and it will work out just fine. I also found it really interesting that the gimbal knows the difference between who it's locked onto and subjects that it's not. So here you can see when I'm running around the gimbal, I can see that Gustavo and George are behind me when I'm running around at certain points. And I'm sure the gimbal can see it too, but it stays on me the whole time. And you never see like a little jitter like it's trying to make up its mind. It consistently just follows me around. So clearly, and I'm not an AI software engineer or anything, but I'm just assuming here, clearly there's some AI going on here, so it knows what subject to track and what the subject looks like and what is different to the subject that it is tracking. At least to some degree. I could be wrong, but I'm just assuming here based off of what I'm seeing myself. Okay, you guys knew this part was coming. What are the drawbacks? Because nothing is perfect, and, well, this gimbal falls into that category. So I have a few issues with this gimbal. Some are like little things that aren't really a big deal, just something to know, and some are kind of legit issues. The payload capacity of a gimbal is so important because it is the limiting factor to what cameras and lenses you can put onto a gimbal. The payload capacity is 1.2 kilos, 1,200 grams. That is the lowest payload capacity of a gimbal that I have reviewed this year. And if I'm being brutally honest, it's just much less than I would expect from a gimbal nowadays, even a small one. To be fair to it, this is the smallest offering from Feiyutech, and if you look at their Scorp 2, it can hold up to 2.5 kilos. But again, for a gimbal of that size, that's also less than I would expect a gimbal to hold. But let's just focus on the Scorp Mini 2 here. So drawback number one, the 1.2 kilo payload limit. What else? The next issue I have with it, and to be really fair, I wouldn't call this an issue, but more something to be aware of. Am I using quotation marks right? This is a small gimbal. Gimbal? This is a small gimbal. Ergo, it's made for smaller cameras. And whilst it can hold my S5 Mark II comfortably, there's clearly a clearance issue because of the eyepiece. But my Lumix S9, because it's much smaller, it fits perfectly. So if you're set on getting this gimbal, just make sure your camera is small enough, otherwise just go for the bigger one. Another really small thing is the design choice. I don't love that the way to lock and unlock four of the three axes, but like the 4 locking points, is with a twisting knob. I'd much prefer it just all be a switch. I don't really get why you'd have 2 be different to the other 2. They should all just be the same. It makes a lot more sense. I also find that using the twisting knobs, there's a chance, because it happened to me, that you don't twist it all the way, and so it's not locked, and then that axis can end up sliding if you're not careful. The next gripe with this gimbal, and it's kind of sad to say, but it's the shape of it. Now, the reason it's sad to say that is because I think it looks really cool. I genuinely like the shape of the gimbal. It's unique, but it's not practical from a transport point of view. At least not in comparison to the traditional pistol grip gimbals. Normally, I'll put my gimbals in the outer side pocket of my bag, I'll strap them in, and they'll be fine, they'll be secure, and they won't move around. But because of the shape of the Scorp Mini 2, I can't do that. Even if I put the bottom leg tripod thing on, it still doesn't give it enough of like length to have it be set securely within the side pocket. I could of course just put it inside my backpack, but I typically have other things inside it that fill up that space: cameras, lenses, audio accessories, whatever it is. Now there is a carrying case and it's pretty well made and it has a top handle, so it's easy to carry around, but typically when I'm out shooting, I want to carry as little bags and cases as possible. It's just something to bear in mind. If you're happy to accommodate carrying an extra case everywhere you go, or you're able to fit it inside your backpack, then you're good to go. My final drawback has to do with the AI tracking. It's not good enough. Unfortunately, with this AI tracking module, it's cool and it does work, but it's not to the point where it can do the job better than I can. And because of that, I don't really feel like having it in the gimbal makes a lot of sense. You can see here in these shots with Gustavo, there's a lot of jerky movement as it tries to keep him in the frame. And I just felt like these shots frankly weren't really usable, because this is a scenario where I would want the gimbal to do the tracking for me, where I'm on the board and I'm focusing on where I'm going so I don't fall over or whatever, and he is being tracked perfectly by the gimbal. There are other gimbals on the market that have attachments that can do the job better, and sure, it's an attachment, you have to pay more for it, it's another thing to buy and power and all of that, and maybe the system's a bit more complex. But for example, the DJI RS4 Pro, I believe, has a really good tracking system from what I've seen on like Instagram and TikTok, and maybe that's something I need to test as well in the future. I can't really comment on it perfectly, but I've seen good things from it. When I first got the Feiyutech Scorp Mini 2, I was really impressed. I was really happy at how well it tracked me, but I realize now it does really well with simple things if you're moving from left to right. But if the scene is more complex, if you're moving fast and you're following, or you're behind or in front of or to the side of a fast moving subject, then it kind of just jerks around and tries to keep them in shot. One thing I found consistently was that it would lose Gustavo every time he went a little bit too far away. And I think the most frustrating thing is there are no settings for the AI module in the app or on the gimbal. So I actually have no idea what the parameters are as to how quickly it moves when it's trying to follow him, as to how wide of a field of view the camera has on the AI module, or anything really. And I just found that really frustrating. You can either turn it on or off. It needs more than that. I feel like it's a good idea, and Feiyutech should definitely keep developing this, and hopefully in their Scorp 3, they make the AI module a lot better, because really it's not where it needs to be just yet. Giving my final verdict, I'm a little bit conflicted. I do like this gimbal. I think as a gimbal, it works really well. The build quality is good, the shape is unique, and for the main purpose of what a gimbal does, making your footage smooth, it does that really well. I also love that there's a variety of functions, like loads of them packed into this little thing, and that there's an AI module, which is a pretty cool direction to see Feiyutech going with a gimbal. But then, as I've already said, there's a lot of things that do bug me about this gimbal, like the shape of it, the build quality, the payload capacity being an issue, especially because down the line, I do want to get bigger lenses. I already know this, I just don't have them yet. I'd say the biggest thing for me is that their main selling point, the fact that this gimbal has AI built in, it isn't to the point where it can do the job as good as me, and I feel like that's the minimum that I would need to see it as a useful feature, because otherwise I'm just never going to use it, so what am I spending my money on? I'm sure there are probably some use cases that the AI module would be great for. I'm just not 100% sure what they might be outside of what I've tested, because for what I have tested, I could do a better job myself. Now, I'm not trying to hate on the gimbal completely, because there's a lot of things I do like. That waypoint mode thing is really, really cool. It's called tracking mode on the gimbal. That is really cool. I actually found that so interesting to set up. This is a really cool way to film, because you could film loads of movement shots all by yourself. And then imagine if you combine that with like an electric slider that, you know, you can program as well. You could get some really cool movement shots with these two pieces of tech, and I think that's really interesting. So overall, do I recommend this gimbal? I have to be honest with you guys, it's kind of hard for me to recommend it when there are other choices out there that I would pick up first. This may mean Feiyutech never send me a gimbal again, and that's unfortunate, because I really do look forward to what they make in the future with their Scorp Mini 3, hopefully having a better AI module. We'll see. but I can't really recommend this gimbal for now. I'm happy I got to test it and try it out for you guys. And if you guys have had different experiences, let me know in the comments below. And if you're not, what gimbals are you guys thinking about getting? Let me know as well. If you're curious about the other gimbals that I've tested this year, check out these videos here, and I'll see you there.